All right, welcome back, everybody, here to First Round Frenzy. Matt and Cole are here with you. Last time we did the offensive line, going offensive tackles and interior offensive line. Now we get into one of the most stacked positions in this year's draft. Originally, we were going to do edge rushers and interior defensive line, but we felt both of those positions needed their own episode. So today we are doing our top 10 edge rushers for the 2025 class. We'll go 10 to 1. And after that, we'll do a few more names, maybe some honorable mentions for the top 10, and then go some mid round steals and some late round steals. Cole, how are we doing today? And you ready to get going?
Yeah, I'm pretty good. I'm excited, ready to talk about some trenches now on the defensive side of the ball. After we broke down the offensive side earlier in the week.
Yeah, so it's exciting. I'll let you get started with your number 10. This position's really interesting, at least for me, when I'm saying this, is I feel like there's a lot of people that have some people really high and some people really low, depending on, who it is. So I think there's going to be a few disagreements in here from us. We'll see. Maybe not. But Cole, I'll let you get started. Who's your number 10?
Yeah, I don't know if we'll have much disagreement player wise, but definitely ranking wise.
Yeah.
I think we're gonna have some disagreements. But my number 10 is gonna be Jack Sawyer out of Ohio State. A guy who is a former five-star recruit, a four-year starter with the Buckeyes, just won the national championship there with Ohio State's defense. And I mean, he ended up notching 9 sacks this year. He was really productive. There's a lot to like of this guy. His high IQ, his twitchiness, his instincts. I think he could slip into the back of the first round. He's not, one of the top guys people are talking about at this position, but I do think certain teams in the back of the first round, like a Detroit Lions, maybe if they can't get a Myles Garrett or another impact pass rusher and they want to find one in the first round, I like, a potential Dan Campbell like guy right here in Jack Sawyer to be a late first round pick, or even squeak in early second round. So Jack Sawyer would be my number 10 to start things off here.
Awesome. I've got him a little bit higher, so I'll talk about him a little bit more in a little bit. But I think what I like really a lot about both Ohio State edge rushers here, JT is just outside my top 10. Both of them, they showed clear progression year after year. You could see it. The amount of tackles increased each year, the amount of sacks increased each year. And that's something that you look for in these kind of players is, you're not supposed to be the finished product when you get to the NFL. You need to show that you can still improve upon that. And they've showed their ability to continue to improve each year. So that's something that I really like about both of those guys. Now, my number 10 is a little bit lower than I think most people have this guy, and that's Shamar Stewart out of Texas A&M. And I think for me, he's a physical beast. I mean, 6'5", 281. He's got a good inside move to get into the B gap and make a good thing there, and he's got a good run defense as well. But for me, it's really tough for me to put him any higher because of the production. And we've seen that Nick Scorton's been able to have production in that defense. And you would think you also have Shamar Turner on the inside as well. You would think that with three elite players on that defensive line, you'd have more than one and a half sacks in one of your 3 years playing with this team. One and a half sacks each year is something that concerns me a little bit. Um, he gets pushed off target easily. He loses his balance. He doesn't use his hands extremely well. And, he could end up being a very, very good pass rusher in this league, but he needs to go to a team that's going to develop him. And the way I'm hearing people talk about him is he's going to go very high. And because of that, I think he's going to go to a team that might not be able to get the best out of him. We'll see. But for me, it's too much of a risk, which is why he's my number 10 player.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I have him a little bit higher, just like you were saying with Sawyer, but I have, Shamar Stewart a little bit higher too. And I'll get into him really soon, but not next up. But I agree. There's a lot of question marks there and a lot of development that needs to happen in his game. But I do like the upside, and I'll talk more about him in a second. But my number 9 is going to be Donovan Ezerico or Ezeraku.
Yep, Ezraku. Yep.
Yeah, Ezeraku. Yeah, this guy is a beast. I mean, he was the ACC Defensive Player of the Year, recorded, what was it, like 12 and that, I don't know, not 12 and a half sacks, more than that. Let me pull it up.
He had 14.
14.
I
Yeah,
think. Yeah.
14 on PFF. I mean, tied for third in the nation. The production value is off the charts of this guy, out of Boston College, and he tore it up at the Senior Bowl as well. Got on a lot of teams' radar. And I think this guy can win with any move. Going off the edge, he can bend. He has, a ridiculous speed off the edge, but his chops, his, dipping overs, dipping rips, all those things. He has every move in the arsenal to attack, offensive tackles, attack running backs that are trying to help chip him on the edge. A little bit undersized, but, I think that that's not really a concern. And, in the newer part of the league, you want a speed edge rusher. And we saw some of those guys, in the Philadelphia Eagles, like a guy like Nolan Smith, he was knocked for being a little bit of an undersized edge rusher. And is he going to be able to produce at the next level? He did. And I feel the same way with Donovan. I don't think the size is going to be an issue. This guy's always been productive throughout his career and has, all the makings and tools to compete at a high level.
Yeah, 100%. I'm really high on Donovan. I've got him a little bit higher on my list. So again, I'll get into him. My number 9 is Princely Umanmielen out of Ole Miss. Uh,
Mhm.
5 years in college football, consistent production, especially over the last 3 years. 4.5 sacks, 7 sacks, 10.5 sacks his final year. Good size, 6'4", 255. He's got one of the best, if I remember correctly, one of the best arm lengths of the edge rushers in this class at 34 and 4 or 5/8 was the last measurement, if I remember correctly. Really good arm length. He's got a good burst off the line of scrimmage. Um, One of the main issues with him, which I mean, I guess isn't really that much of an issue, is he doesn't do well when he gets double teamed. He struggles to really make anything happen, which again is I think something that you can develop and you could also use to your advantage if you're a team. So if you really need to double team him, do some sort of stunt. Anyway, point is, I really like his upside. I think he's shown that he's been able to produce at the college level, and with his size, his arm length, and what he's shown to do, there should be no issue with him translating this to the NFL. Speed, power, finesse, everything you can ask for in an edge rusher.
Yeah, I really like Princely a lot. And I have him a lot higher than this in terms of
Oh,
what I project him doing.
okay.
So I'll get to him in a minute as well. Like I said, we're gonna have a lot of these top guys just in different orders. But
Yep.
my next one is gonna be Shamar Stewart, who you mentioned as your 10. He's gonna be my 8. I really like I know we talked about the issues of a developmental guy, but I like the upside of what he can turn into. I mean, this guy just turned 21 in November. He's still really young and has a lot more room to grow in his game. And yeah, the production wasn't there like you were talking about, but I think he has all the makings of being a monster if he can get in the right system and with the right team that can develop him the right way and get him on the field. And, once he hits that second contract, this guy's going to be what, 23, 24
Yep.
years old. And even if it's not with that first team, he'll sign a big deal that second contract and be good for years to come. So I like Shamar Stewart in terms of the development. High upside guy, hasn't shown it yet, but I think his best days are definitely ahead of him.
Yeah, 100%. It's all upside. That's the thing. And I think that's the only reason why I had him lower. When you look at like what he actually is, he's probably a top 5 player at this position. When you look at everything from physicals to intangibles, all that, he's potentially top 5. But right now, 8 to 10 I think is a good range for him to be at right now.
Yeah.
Now I've got his teammate in number 8, Nick Scorton out of Texas
Mhm.
A&M. Another very solid player, good power, good in both the pass rush and the run game as well. He lacks a little bit of length in the arms, which is a little bit concerning and allows tackles to kind of take advantage of him sometimes. And the other big concern for me is the downgrade in production this past season. I mean, a really good sophomore season, 50 tackles and 10 sacks. This past season, 37 tackles and 5 sacks. Now, I believe he only played 6 or 7 games this year, if I remember correctly. I don't think he played the whole season. I'd have to check. No, he played 10 games. 10 games this season, I believe. So, 2 to 3 less games than you probably had last season. Um, but still a little bit concerning there. Really solid player. Right now, he's more finished product than his teammate, which is why I have him higher here. But both guys could be very, very good edge rushers in the NFL.
Yeah, they both project to be pretty solid. I'll have him a little bit higher as well. My number seven, I think you might have this guy a little bit higher, but I'm gonna go Mike Green
Okay.
at seven. Even though he did just lead the FBS in sacks and tackles for a loss, and he did everything right on the production sheet. My only negatives with him was the rest of the production sheet. I mean, you look at the missed tackles that he had this year and the missed opportunities he had, even though he still had, what was it, 17 sacks or something crazy. Yeah, 17 and a half sacks. But still I think he left a lot on the table there. And he is just a little bit loose with his feet. He made a little bit of some gambles on certain plays, and he also didn't become a full-time starter till this year,
Yep.
which is both good and bad. I mean, the fact he was the best defensive player in the nation in his first year as a starter is a plus, but it just wasn't a consistent production and consistent on the field work that you're hoping to see out of a full college resume from a guy being a potential first round pick.
100%. And again, I'll get into him in a little bit later. My number seven, we've already talked about Jack Sawyer out of Ohio State. Already mentioned, really clear progression, ability in the run game. He sets a really strong edge. He's probably he might be the best run defender in this class of the edge position. He's
Yeah,
up
forgot
there,
to mention that.
really good. Um, uh, I mean, the one thing with me is him getting off the line of scrimmage when it comes to pass rush. If he can just get a little bit more burst, a little bit more explosiveness off the line of scrimmage, he can be a lot more effective. And you hear people say this all the time, especially Mel Kiper. I feel like I hear him say this like 15 times every time I hear it. Is the 8 to 12 range for sacks is where you want to be. He can be that guy if he can just time himself off the line of scrimmage a little bit better. So he's going to be an effective run defender at the next level. That's no question. But in order to get the big bucks, in order to be, a top tier edge rusher, you need to be able to rush the quarterback. So in order to get ahead of some of these top tier tackles, he's going to have to improve his ability off the line of scrimmage. That's the one thing that I think is holding him back. Otherwise, I'm really high on Jack Sawyer.
Yeah, I mean, you definitely hit on all the right things that I might have left off there. But definitely, the run defense is off the charts with Jack Sawyer. It's just different people are going to view him different ways.
Exactly.
Um, I'll do a first one we haven't talked about yet. Michael Williams is going to be my number six player on the defensive line. In terms of the first round athleticism, it's there from what we expect to see out of these Georgia defensive linemen. Really uses every bit of his, size and frame, which is off the charts, 6'5", 265. And he bullies offensive linemen every time he gets on the field against an offensive lineman, and he's done it all. I mean, you can put that guy on kickoff if you wanted to. You can put him anywhere on the field, and he's going to be an instant weapon and consistent as well. Had six sacks, and then five sacks, 17 total in his career at Georgia. And this guy's only 20. So you talk about what he can turn into, the age there is a big thing with him of, what more he has to grow in his game. So Michael Williams is, going to entice a lot of people this year.
Yeah, 100%. I also have Michael Williams as my number six in this. Pretty much the exact same as you said. I mean, really good frame, really good size. Somehow it looks like he can actually add more muscle to his frame, which is ridiculous already. I think with him, the biggest thing for me is his counter arsenal. He doesn't really have that many moves that he can go to outside of his first move. Um, and that has kind of altered his production in the pass rush. I mean, he's still, as you said, 6 sacks. It's still consistent for the college game. It's just nothing crazy. But I mean, people are saying he's probably a top 10 pick in this draft. A lot of people are saying, maybe the Jets, maybe the Panthers. If not there, he probably moves past 15. But he is a potential top 10 talent in this class. But I think there are just like a few things he needs to work on before he can kind of get into that top 5 level.
Yeah, I think like, getting the consistent pressure really was a big thing for
Yep.
him. And then some injury tweaks as well that dinged him up throughout his career is going to knock him down just a little bit. I don't know. I've been seeing a little bit of the top 10 too, but I think more of the 10 to 20 range for
Yep.
Michael Williams is probably going to be best. But who knows? We've seen anything happen.
Yeah, seriously. Anything can happen in the NFL draft.
Okay, so you had the same one. Okay, so I'm gonna go Princely Uman Mielen I love this guy. What he can do, how he projects again. Just I have been mocking him a lot with the Bears in the second round, hoping he can, make it to that point. I don't think it's going to happen though. His versatility at, during the all or the bowl weekend impressed a lot of people being able to work inside and outside. And this guy is just saying all the right things right now. 13 and a half tackles his last year, or sacks, excuse me, this past year, 10 and a half sacks across 12 games. I like Uman Milan. I don't know. A lot of people have him as a first round guy, but it's weird. He's got a weird range of where he can go in the first round, but I think that his style has been first round style before. And, fitting, the desirable accelerations, the desirable versatility, the urgency, all those kinds of things could go, a big way. But man, I would love for him to come to Chicago. In the second round to be sick. I just don't think he gets there. He's a really good edge rusher, and I mean, just trying to find something else you didn't already hit on. But yeah, that's pretty much all I got for you.
Yeah, no, I really like Princely. I had a really tough time with this list because I already mentioned JT as one of the guys that I wanted to get in here. He's really solid. There are a bunch of guys that we'll get into in a little bit. But my number five is James Pierce out of Tennessee. Really good production the past 2 years, 9.5, 7.5 sacks. Good in the run game as well. He's extremely explosive. He has a great speed to power rush move. He does very similar to Michael Williams. He needs to improve his counter arsenal a little bit more. But I think for me, we're going to go into these top five guys here. For me, these top five guys, outside of Abdul Carter, 2 to 5 can go in any order for me. I think they're all extremely talented. And a lot of them aren't really projected to go that high. I mean, none of them are projected to go top 10. I don't know about your guys, but my guys 2 to 5 aren't really projected to go top 10. So they could potentially be that 15 to late first range where teams can get a steal at this position. But James Pierce, extremely twitchy, one of the highest rated guys going into this year. Fell down a little, some draft boards a little bit. But he's still an ultra talented player, 6'5", 243 as well. I mean, really, really solid frame and build.
Yeah, I'll have him a little higher, and we'll get more into James Pierce. I'm gonna hit back on Nick Scourton. You had him a little lower. I have him in my top five at number four. We're at now,
Yep.
rolling through this. But this guy, I mean, it says he's 280. I think come combine time, he's gonna trim that down a little bit, and it'll help him. But even at that size, he looked impressive on the tape. If he can shed that weight, even better, because it'll make him look even more explosive at the combine and get him in that tier of James Pierce and Abdul Carter, in my opinion. And still young. He's going to be 20 on draft night. But I think he's already flashed some of his dominance and the bend that he has off the edge. I think he can be a rotational piece to start out, but like a very, very good rotational piece and then work his way into a starting role. We did the mock draft, ideal Green Bay Packers selection to where you can, put him in a defensive front with Rashawn Gary and Lucas Van Ness and have just a steamroller, big bodied guy that can come in and make that explosiveness that, you need out of, a key situation. Um, but just aesthetically pleasing from the number standpoint, from the tape standpoint. I like what I saw out of the bin from him and what he can be, and we'll see how other teams view him. Because you talked about some of the negatives that knocked him down on your list, but I like what I saw out of Nick Sourton.
Yeah. That those three Texas A&M defensive front players are going to make three teams or less very, very
Oh,
happy.
oh yeah.
So there's no question about that. These two positions, edge rusher and interior defensive line, stacked. A lot of high level talent here. My number four, we've already talked about him, Donovan Ezraku out of Boston College. I really liked what I saw on tape. I mean, he's a little undersized, but he's got great arm length. His swim move is one of the best I've seen on tape this year. It's really effective. He's got a really good rush plan every single time he sets foot on the field. He lacks a little bit of power. He's pretty much a straight speed rusher, but as you mentioned earlier, I mean, that's coveted this in a lot of the top edge rushers have been speed rushers, and they just add a little bit of power if they need it. Um, as I said, a little bit undersized, so going up against bigger tackles could potentially be an issue, but it hasn't really shown too much in the film that I've watched. And he needs to diversify his rushes a little bit. As I said, you know, swim move is amazing, has a good spin move as well, but he kind of has the same sort of attack every time. Even though it's well planned, it's very similar. So if he can diversify a little bit more, maybe add a little bit more of power in there, then he could become a much better player. But I mean, the production was off the charts. And I mean, it just looked fluid and smooth every single time he rushed the passer. So I am really high on him. He's my number 4.
Nice. My number three, I'm gonna go to another Georgia boy. Jalen Walker is gonna be my three. You might have him in your top two.
I
Oh,
actually I actually have him as a linebacker right now, off-ball linebacker. So I did not
okay.
include him in this. I just, for me personally, this might change over the next few weeks, but as of right now, from what I've seen, I see him as a great edge rusher, but I see him as a better off-ball linebacker. So I just didn't include him in this one.
Yeah, I was gonna say and add to it, like he is severely undersized for an edge rusher, and especially going up against 300 plus pound offensive tackles. But I think in the pure athleticism standpoint, someone's going to take a chance on him and put him in that role pretty high in this draft. I mean, I think we had him going top 10 to the Carolina Panthers in our mock draft, but it's going to be a toss up between him and Michael Williams, of which Georgia defender and edge rusher is going to be the first off the board. In terms of what Walker can be with the physical tools to develop into a potential premier pass rusher, I think there's, for me, a lot more to like than a Michael Williams, even though Michael Williams is a lot more polished and, ready to go right out of the gate. I think what you can work with if you're a younger team with a Jalen Walker and eventually develop him into your star player on your defense, that holds value, especially when you have the younger teams looking for, not a day one starter, but more of a long-term franchise starter. Like I said, like the Carolina Panthers or these teams at the top of the draft. Jalen Walker is going to hold some value there and in a lot of front offices.
Yeah, 100%. And Jalen Walker, I have him. I'll just tell you right now, if I did have him as edge rusher, he would be around this time, like 2 to 4, probably in one of those three, 2, 3, 4. He'd probably be there. Very solid position. I just think, again, a little bit smaller, not as much experience as an edge rusher. I think he's better against the run than he is rushing the passer. So I think off ball linebacker is his better spot. But again, by the end of this, we're going to go through the combine, we're going to go pro day, we're going to go interviews, we're going to kind of see where teams have him on their board, whether an edge rusher or off ball linebacker. I might change my mind. But as of right now, I think he's better as an off ball linebacker. So he's not in this list. All right. Number 3 for me is a little bit of a rogue shout. Another one that might end up moving down boards as we get some measurements in and see a little bit more. But it's Josiah Stewart out of Michigan. I loved what I saw on tape. Another undersized guy, but he's got an insanely powerful bull rush. Extremely explosive. He's aggressive. He's violent. He's produced all 4 years, 12 and a half sacks his freshman year at Coastal, then 5.5 his junior year in his first year at Michigan, and 8.5 sacks and 2 forced fumbles in his senior season this past year. Good against the run, good pass rusher. Sometimes he's a little too aggressive. So if you get a quarterback that can move around in the pocket well, he'll sometimes overrun him a little bit. But that's something that you can kind of teach him to control a little bit more. But insane power, consistent production. He can drop into coverage. I really like his all-around game. Again, a little undersized, but I think he can be really effective at the next level.
Guza coming out with the bang.
Yeah,
The guy I didn't even have on the list.
we're
I
going.
love it.
We're sticking with our guys here. He's one of my
Putting
guys.
putting
So,
me on him, putting me on him. My number two is going to be James Pierce. You talked about him. I have a little bit higher, which is funny because in DJ's mock draft, he had him 31. He said some guys are going to put him early in the first round,
yeah,
and he had him the second to last pick of the first round. So another one that's the range is like all over the place on day one for James Pierce, but I think he has an elite and absolute rare speed at the position, and that's going to be highly coveted. And that's what worked for him in college, but I think he's more than that. I think he's more than the speed rusher everyone says is his high trait. And I think that if he gets his hand placement a little bit better and how he puts his hands on the tackles and works off of them, that can make him even more of a consistent edge rusher. But right now, I think the speed is the killer thing off the edge. You want a guy that can get the jump off and get the time to sack, time to tackle, all those things. He's going to come in and probably be at the top 10 in the position, maybe even higher in those categories on next gen stats because the speed's off the charts. I mean, Brian Burns is always up there and he looks way faster than Brian Burns ever has coming off the edge. That's everyone's favorite pro comp for him, and he's even faster than that guy was.
Yeah. I
And
that,
also a
yeah.
Charlotte native as well.
There
So
you go.
North Carolina guy.
That's one guy that I do need to watch a little bit more tape on. I mean, I like what I've seen, but I do need to watch a little bit more. He's going to be one of those guys that could him and who's the other one? Him and Michael Williams are the two that I'm going to be looking at the most over the next few weeks. A lot of people have them high, some people have them low. So I really got to kind of lock in to see where I want them to go. But which is why I kind of put them in the middle of the pack for now. But if you couldn't tell, but really like both of their games. All right, number two for me, as you said, I've got him a lot higher. Mike Green out of Marshall. I just really like what I see. Production's key. He had extreme production. I think a lot of people are going to say, "Oh, it's Marshall. He didn't really play that great competition." No, he didn't. But he dominated that competition. He didn't just beat the competition; he dominated it. Then when he went up against Ohio State, he showed that he could hang with the big dogs. Simple as that. Did he have his best game? No, but he went out there. He played well. He still put pressure on the quarterback. And that's against some of the best O linemen in all of college football that you're going up against. So, 81 total tackles, 17 sacks, three forced fumbles, sorry, this year. I mean, extremely fast, extremely explosive, probably the most violent edge rusher we're going to see this entire draft process this year. And yeah, I just don't think there's too much negatives. I think if you go to a team that can develop an edge rusher, there's no question that he's going to be a superstar. So arm length is a question mark, like we've had with a few of these guys. He's shown that he's able to overcome that, so that shouldn't be too much of an issue. And then he does need to improve his arsenal a little bit more. He uses that spin move a lot, and we saw that on Senior Bowl, even though he dominated. Some offensive tackles kind of got the idea that he was always going to use that and kind of got the better of him a few times. But if he can add one or two more pass moves and ease up on those mistakes that you mentioned with missed tackles and stuff like that, there's no question he should be a top 3 edge rusher by the end of this. Top 3 from this class by the end of his career. No question.
Yeah, I mean the production's off the chart in 1 year starting, and if you are banking on that 1 year and that's the guy he is, then yeah, I mean he's going to be really good.
Yeah.
So we both got the same number one,
Yeah.
it seems.
Yep.
Most likely going to be the number one pick, saying the Titans don't do anything crazy or trade out of the selection, which is starting to get some, heavy buzz the last couple of weeks. But Abdul Carter is without a doubt, in my opinion, the best player in this draft class.
Yeah. No question.
I mean, in terms of the versatility, and my favorite thing watching him is the second gear. I mean, even if he gets knocked down, the fact he can get back up and make a play, or if it's opposite side and he's rushing and being able to run down guys on the other side of the field, that is the difference.
Yep.
That is what you look at on the tape and say, this guy is different from everyone else in this class and everyone else in the entire draft. And what makes him a, potential first round selection. I mean, we're talking about the last couple of years, the Aiden Hutchinsons that go, 1 or 2 overall, or the Will Anderson that went third overall, Chase Young went second overall. He has these rare traits, and it shows up on the tape of you look at this guy and say, yeah, he without a doubt is going to be incredible.
Yeah. I mean, outside of Travis Hunter, he's probably the most athletic player in this entire class. He might be more athletic than Travis Hunter.
Yeah.
He's extremely athletic. And as you said, he pops off the screen when you're watching tape. That Penn State defense is amazing. There are a lot of players that over the next few years, you're probably going to hear us talking about them, right? Like there's a lot of really talented players there, but he just pops off the screen. He's on one side of the field. He shows up on the other side of the field. He rushes the passer. All of a sudden, you see him 10 yards down the field making a tackle on a running back. I mean, he's everywhere. He's only been a full time edge rusher for 1 year. He's had 50 plus tackles in each of his 3 years, plus the pass rush production as well. I mean, he is an outstanding talent. He's going to play off the edge. He can drop back into coverage if necessary. Good against the run. I mean, he's an all around great player at the position. And I mean, if he doesn't go one, the Browns are going to get exactly what they need to replace Myles Garrett at two. Like he is a
Yeah.
top, there's no question he's going top two. It just depends on what the Titans do. Do they go quarterback? Are they trading back so someone else takes quarterback? But he is a top two player, no question. He's my number one player. He's your number one player. I mean, he's elite.
I mean, I think he is number one.
Yeah. Yeah.
If I said right now, he would be number one.
All right. So those are our top tens. Now we're gonna just get into some names. We won't spend too much time on them, but we'll start with some honorable mentions. I'll go first just because I've already mentioned JT. Very similar to Jack Sawyer. As I said, that like 7 to like 14 range is kind of hard to place everybody. There's a lot of production. I mean, I know pretty much everybody's been saying that 20 to 60 range in this draft. I'd even say potentially to 70, 75 is really close. It's the really heart of this draft. But JT is one of my guys, and Femi Oladeju out of UCLA, another guy that I really like for that mid second round, maybe late second round. Those two guys are going to be guys that we're going to look at that are extremely productive, good against the run, extremely athletic, and are going to make impact at the NFL level.
Yeah, I'm gonna go as well with Femi out of UCLA. I think what he can do in the run is absolutely blow up the run game, and he also has that key trait I talked about of the second gear, running down players, being aggressive after the football. If the play is not going to his side, it's not like he's just taking the play off. I mean, his motor is absolutely incredible. He was all over the football, had 57 total tackles. He was getting after the quarterback. PFF had him with 29 stops in the run game as well. I think that he is going to be a day two guy for sure, and we'll see how high he goes. But I mean, the fact both of us mentioned him, he's on both of our radars. And then my other guy I want to throw out there, Virginia Tech guy,
Yeah.
in Antoine Powell Ryland, and what he can do, rushing the passer as well, was pretty incredible. And was the Dudley Award he won. But yeah, I mean, the production was there. He was the other guy that was tied in third in the nation with 16 sacks this year, and very quietly 16 sacks. And I think the diversity of his pass rush moves is really cool, and altering his alignments, altering the way he rushes against one-on-ones, shredding offensive tackles. He's played on the left, he's played on the right. The versatility is off the charts there, and you can kind of plug and play him wherever you want to, which with the later round, or not later round, but once you start getting guys off the board, he's one you look at and you're like, okay, we can do a lot of things with this guy.
Yeah. Moving on, just kind of to that next level of players. I actually have Antoine Power Ryland as my first guy. Really not much else to add. I mean, you pretty much hit it on the nail there. Two more guys, Kyle Kennard out of South Carolina, Landon Jackson out of Arkansas. Two guys. I mean, Landon Jackson, 6'7", 280. He added 40 pounds while he was at Arkansas, I heard. Ridiculous. But both guys, good production in their final seasons, good frames. They're just both really solid players. They're like my, 12 to 15 range right now, if we're ranking edge rushers, that are probably going to go day two later in the day, probably early to mid third round, if I had to guess. Kind of depends on how many of these guys go off the board early, but really like those guys.
Yep. Those are the last ones that I had on my list.
Okay.
I'm not going to go with some deep guys here just because I know we got the D tackles as well. So I
Yep.
didn't want to start mixing in guys that I think can be tweeners, D tackle, D ends. So I know we'll have a full episode just with the guys on the interior. So
All right. Well, that's perfect then. That's pretty much what we'll lay off. There's some other guys that we can talk about later on in this process. Obviously, we've got the combine coming up, we got the pro days coming up. Some of these guys, I mean, There's David Walker. There's Elijah Roberts out of SMU, who is a guy that could potentially play inside. But there's some other guys that could potentially creep up the board in the next few weeks. So if they do, we'll talk about them later. But yeah, as you mentioned, I mean, it's pretty very similar top tens. Josiah Stewart, the only one that you didn't have, and I just didn't have Jalen Walker
Yeah,
in mind. But good, it's a good discussion. I mean, I think there's a lot of talent in this position, and we'll see what happens. But interior defensive line, another stacked position, is coming up next. So,
sounds good.
all right, we will talk to you guys on Monday for interior
Monday.
defensive line. All right, see you, Cole.